So Vicky, thank you for being here today and for having this chat with me.
Thank you so much for asking me, Adam. I'm delighted to be here.
No worries. As you know, the theme of the week is resilience. Whenever I thought about the word and the idea, I kind of had to think if it applied to me, whether it was a word that I could actually use about myself. And I think what I thought about was having been an actor over the last 10, 12 years, and I came to the conclusion, yes, I have built up a certain amount of resilience. But the paradox for me was that I am not always resilient. So I think before we start our conversation, it's just to say that resilient people aren't always resilient. Is that something that you would agree with?
Oh,
or?
Very true, yes. And it's interesting because when you first asked me about this, I think I said to you, oh, there's no one more resilient than actors.
Yes.
Because it kind of goes with the territory, doesn't it? It's kind of part of an actor's DNA that you have to have a certain amount of resilience just to be in the industry.
Yeah.
But I think what you said there is also very important, which is that resilience, like many things in life, like many, attributes like confidence, for example, ebbs and flows and comes and goes, and at times you can feel very resilient, but there are certain things that will completely throw you off course. And so I think we have a certain amount of resilience hardwired in our DNA, but it is certainly something that you can build up and strengthen.
And as your experience obviously as an actress but also a confidence coach, does confidence and resilience go hand in hand? Is that something that when you're coaching somebody, they're building that up as they go as well?
Yeah, I think I thought a lot about confidence and resilience and what the difference and similarities are. And confidence, to some extent, is a certain sort of self-resilience, I think. And I always say when I'm coaching people that confidence is something that you build up. You kind of build it up layer by layer. Certain things will chip away at it. But even so, even if you are feeling super confident in certain situations or, in certain jobs or with certain people, that doesn't mean that you're confident all the time. And it is certainly something that I would say doesn't come naturally. Whereas resilience, I think, we do have a certain amount of it built in. And, as humankind, I think we're quite resilient because we're adaptable, for example. That's one thing. I think of children being very resilient.
Yeah.
I think of toddlers, my own children particularly, who seem to fall over constantly. But, they're always getting back up again and they just keep on going. That's quite resilient.
Yeah.
So, so I coach on confidence, but I think certainly confidence and resilience are, intertwined. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that. I was playing tennis this morning with my niece and nephew, and they're 7 and 10, and they don't play it often, so, they were missing shots and not getting it over the net, and it didn't matter how many times that happened. They just picked the ball up again and started playing again, and actually, for an hour and a half, they had fun and they enjoyed the experience, even though they were essentially not getting the ball over the net and not able to play it.
Yeah.
I just wonder, as adults, do we lose that sense of resilience that we see in children, where they will just keep practicing something until they get it right? Is that a skill that we unlearn in a way?
Yeah, I think we do. I think, we get to a certain point as children, and that kind of self-consciousness kicks in, and that awareness, and suddenly we're under all sorts of pressure from peers, community, society, and all of that starts flooding in and maybe pushing out our natural resilience and confidence that we have as, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 7-year-olds. So when I talk about confidence with my clients, I definitely talk about it being a learnt skill, something that has to be relearnt, I suppose. Yeah. So you had it as a kid, you probably lost a lot of it as a teenager.
Yeah.
And then as an adult, you have to kind of find it again, or learn new skills. Yeah.
Okay, so we've decided that resilience can be learnt. It can be cultivated. So where do we begin? How do we start to access the resilience we already know and have to a certain degree? How do we cultivate it in our lives, do you think?
Well, that is a good question and reminds me of a conversation I had with my 8-year-old, to go back to children again, when I asked him about confidence, and I said, where do you get confidence from if you haven't got any? And quick as a flash, he said, do hard things.
Okay.
And I was like, wow, I was quite blown away.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, that's true. It's doing hard things that gives you confidence. Not necessarily, and this is important, I think, not necessarily being brilliant or succeeding even, but actually even attempting to do that hard thing is something that can give you confidence. And I think resilience is the ability to bounce back from hard things.
Yeah. Okay.
Adversity maybe, or failure or difficulty, however small or sometimes huge that can be. It's about the ability to pick yourself back up again and get up and keep going.
Yeah, I actually, before we had this conversation, I looked up the dictionary definition of resilience. So resilience is our ability to adapt and bounce back when things don't go as planned. So I think as adults we have an idea of how something's going to work out, and because it doesn't necessarily go the way we wanted it to, there's this perceived failure. And I use the word failure lightly because I think we eradicate the process. We're so focused on the end goal that we think, oh, that failed, but we kind of disregard the lesson.
Yes,
working up to that.
I totally agree, and I love to embrace failure because I think we've kind of demonized it somehow, haven't we? Like failure is a really bad thing, and of course it's not.
Well, I think it stops us from even trying sometimes, which we then don't get to fail, and we don't get to bounce back, and we don't get to build up resilience.
That's really true, actually, isn't it? Yeah. And that goes back to that trying hard things. You know, if you're not even going to try, then you're never going to test yourself, I suppose. You're never going to know whether you have that ability or not. And that's how you diminish your resilience, because you kind of need something to test it against, in a way.
And is that just about stretching your comfort zones? Is that how we build up resilience?
Oh, I love talking about comfort zones. Because I'm always telling people to get out of their comfort zone. As both an actor and a coach, actually, we have to get out of our comfort zone as actors, no doubt. But even when I'm coaching, particularly a lot of female entrepreneurs, I coach a lot of people like myself who are, starting their own business, and nothing happens in your comfort zone. It is so true. But that fear holds us back from doing so many things. And I remember even before I launched my business, I was kind of, I don't know what I thought was going to happen, but I was really hesitant and really scared. And I thought, it had to be perfect, and I had to have a website, and I had to have X, Y, and Z. And actually, no.
Yeah, you just have to take the first step.
You have to take the first step, the little baby step, and stop putting all those obstacles in your way and kind of just launch yourself out of your comfort zone. And that's when you realise that it's not as scary as you thought it was. Yeah. So yes, I talk a lot about getting out of your comfort zone, giving things a go, and just, seeing how it all works out.
Yeah, and not waiting for perfection. I think
definitely. Perfection is the enemy of everything.
Yeah. Yeah, because we don't often post our failures on social media. No. We kind of see everybody else doing things, and we think. And
I think, again, social media is a wonderful thing, but it also slightly distorts what we perceive is going on, and we are encouraged to post our best selves online rather than our kind of true, authentic selves. Yeah, possibly.
Absolutely.
I think.
We were talking there about being adaptable, and I think in the last 4 or 5 months we've really had to adapt quite quickly to the change in how we work, how we create work, how we even see our families, and that everything's changed. So how do we how do we build up that adaptability and that flexibility? That actually, that is one of the key things to being resilient, is that you embrace change. I'm thinking about all the times, because I lived in London for a long time, and obviously you were an actor, but you weren't always in work, and you had to be able to turn your hand to whatever job to earn a bit of money, whether you were working 9 to 5 in an office or cycling a rickshaw at the weekend, or literally the list is endless. And I'm thinking that's what made me resilient over those years through my 20s, that I was just really adaptable, and I kept, when things shifted and a job ended, it was gone, and I started the next thing, and the next theatre job will come up, and then it was back at home in Belfast, or it was in London. How do we build up that idea, especially people now that maybe are feeling a bit fragile after these last 4 months? Maybe they have lost their job, maybe they've been made redundant. How do they embrace that change and turn it into something positive?
Well, I like to say to people that you've done it before. You may not be aware of it, but you have definitely faced hardship before. You have definitely overcome adversity.
Yeah.
You have definitely stepped out of your comfort zone. So one of the things that I encourage people to do is just to reflect a little bit on what has gone before, and times when they have shown resilience, they have been confident, they have got over something. Because one of the things, again, that is a sort of human experience, and I guess particularly now with the pandemic, is that we all face adversity at some point.
Yeah.
Like, that is for sure.
Unavoidable.
Yeah. And however it manifests in your life, you will always, experience grief at some point, love and loss, and all of those big kind of life events will happen to you. And even as a teen, when everything is magnified by 1,000, you start to get a sense of the enormity of life. Even though it may only be the fact that someone you want to go out with doesn't want to go out with you.
Yeah.
So I encourage people to look back and think of times when they've already, overcome something difficult.
So just having a bit of perspective, being able to see that what you're going through now won't last forever.
Yeah. So, and that we have that within us. So we have resilience within us already. It's a case of recognising it and maybe building on it.
Yeah.
And strengthening it. And the way to do that is to think it's not going to last forever. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
This too shall pass.
Yeah.
Whatever it is not going to be your permanent state.
Yeah, and trying to change the narrative in your head, the story you're telling yourself about what's happening, what you're going through, just making that shift and maybe focusing on things that you can control, that you can do right now, even if that's just, what can I do today? I can get up, have a shower, get changed, apply for that job, change my CV slightly, just one or two things that might, as you said before, taking that first step. Yes.
And again, when you have overwhelm, and I was very overwhelmed at the beginning of this lockdown, I have to say, which I think many people were, you have to kind of take a step back and think of the little things, the little baby steps that you can take.
Yes.
And sometimes maybe that day it's the fact that you got out of bed and had a shower.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then making a plan.
Yeah.
Making a plan.
Yeah. But as you said initially, because I was very resistant initially, and I was, no, this isn't happening, I'm going to just keep ploughing on. And eventually you have to accept the situation is what it is and the work isn't there. Yeah. And it's a time of reflection, really, Yeah, and terrifying. Yeah. And at the same time, what I saw, I think, what gave me such optimism, particularly with the creative industries,
was all the amazing things that people came up with.
Yeah.
And that is joyous and positive and optimistic, because creative people have such a wealth of ideas. And again, it is that resilience, isn't it? It's like in one fell swoop, your entire, year's work was gone. The places where you worked were gone. The people that you worked with, you couldn't, communicate with. And yet so many amazing things were happening online. And people sharing freely as well. Their talents and skills. And I was absolutely blown away by some of the things I saw happening. So hope is really important.
Hope is, and you touched on something there, optimism as well. That relates back to resilience as well. Optimistic people, people that cultivate optimism and can always see the bright side of life, which can be very, very hard to do sometimes, especially in a cloud as big as the pandemic. It was only a few weeks into it that I started to kind of see more clearly, and because I couldn't think about creativity and trying to write or record something, or it was just all consuming. So I think it's about, as you said, cultivating that optimism and focusing on.
And I think we are, again, part of our DNA is to look at the negative, right? We're kind of like, we're the cavemen, always expecting, the saber-toothed tiger to come along and
fight or flight.
So it's accepting that is a natural part of who we are, and being human is to catastrophize a little bit and become overwhelmed. And certainly with all the stuff going on in the world at the moment, it is very hard not to be overwhelmed by what's happening. But you can take action. I turned the news off. I didn't look at the news for a week. That was one of the things I did. Which was very helpful. Social media, again, take a break from social media. It's
because it's a double-edged sword. You can take a lot of optimism from it, or you can focus on, the comparison game of, I'm not doing that. I'm not creating work online, or because work online isn't for everybody. No. There are writers that don't want to put their play online, or don't want to put their book away.
There's not one size fits all. It never has been, and it never will be. And I thought I was immune to the comparison game until I had a bit of a midlife crisis, and it was very insidious. Actually, I didn't even realise it was happening.
Right.
For years, I had been on social media and applauded people when they'd done well, and been so delighted for all my friends. And I just found this, and I think it was after a move. I think it was. We'd moved countries. I think maybe it was even when we moved to Belfast, and I wasn't quite sure what was happening in my acting career. I was just kind of trying to get going again, and in that place of vulnerability and fragility, I suddenly started to get all the negative. It felt like almost tendrils in my head, sort of drilling down and going, oh yeah, you're not good enough. Yeah, you're not doing it right. Look at all these other people achieving, and that was not a good time. Not a good time at all.
There's something you said there about vulnerability, because that's what I discovered when I was thinking about resilience, and particularly I was thinking actually about Like-Minded, the podcast series, because there was a through line with every artist that I realised they all embraced that sense of vulnerability. Very openly had these conversations about their mental health, and I thought that's part of resilience, isn't it? Embracing vulnerability. We get it when we're in rehearsals for a play, or the first time you step out on opening night. It's kind of, here I am. This is it. It's all out there. You know what I mean? You do.
This is me.
This is me. Yeah. It's that moment of, I'm going to be seen, and please be nice.
Yeah.
It's kind of unavoidable. It's one of those unavoidable things that comes with building up resilience, I think.
And I think we have possibly, or I say we. Some people maybe have a bit of a warped idea of vulnerability, and whether it's, a good thing to show vulnerability, whether you try and squash it down, whether you hide it, whether you build a sort of facade around your own vulnerability. But as we know, Brené Brown talks a lot about vulnerability being the key. That's actually, the way to live life is to acknowledge that vulnerability. And I think resilience is a lot about kind of leaning into what you're feeling. And something I've learned with years of therapy and depression is that actually to sit with your emotions, to sit with your feelings, vulnerability and other sadness or whatever it is more helpful than trying to run away from it. Trying to distract yourself, avoid, being there. All the things that we do, we consume, we're addicted, we eat too much, we drink too much. All of the things we do are really kind of to distract ourselves from feeling our feelings.
Yeah, because it's easier.
Yeah, and vulnerability feels scary, right?
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that people who are, resilient recognise that.
Yeah.
And are happy to, or are able to, I should say, stick with it, lean into it, and realise this too will pass.
Yeah, they realise when they're in that moment of perceived failure, where they've maybe tried something, I think they have the awareness that, that's alright, I've been here before. Like, I keep a journal, I have done for over 10 years now, and I can actually see mental patterns of, that's why I didn't get that job. I blame myself and I did that and you can actually see you nearly beating yourself up, really.
Yes, we're so good at that, aren't we? Yeah. Is that a natural state? I don't know.
I just think it actually comes easier than being kind to yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that comes back to that hardwired for negativity. I had an acting teacher once that would, anytime you did an exercise, it would be, tell me what you did well. As soon as you come out of the exercise, that was the first thing you wanted to know. And it was kind of confusing because your brain want to go, can I not tell you what I did badly? Because I want you to know what I did. I know I did that.
The first thing I want to do is
Whereas
that was terrible and that was bad and my god.
It throws your brain. It's kind of like, what did I do well? Oh, okay. Well, actually, I'm really proud of that moment or that thing I did. And then it would be, and what do you want to do better or try to do better next time? It was kind of, I think we have to very carefully choose the language that we use for ourselves, because we can very quickly become beat ourselves up.
It's reprogramming your inner critic, isn't it? Yeah. So
that you bounce back quicker, because in a way it doesn't really matter how quickly you bounce back, as long as you can get back to that place. You can get back on stage, or go back to writing your book, or sorry, I just went off on a tangent there, because I remember a particular director I had who would make us do exercises and then slap us on the arm going, I don't believe you. Probably wouldn't get away with that.
Which is a slightly different experience. But it's really stuck with me. Funnily enough, I hadn't used that exercise myself.
No. When I was thinking about resilience, I went on and looked on TED Talks actually again, and there was one by Lucy Hone in Christchurch, and actually her idea of resilience was linked to grief. Just picking up on what you said before, it seemed to be an intrinsic part of that process, that actually, as you said, we're hardwired for resilience, and you don't know how resilient you are until you face something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think grief is interesting because it's something that we all experience. And I know Lucy's talk that you're talking about, TEDx Christchurch, she obviously lost her daughter. Parental grief, I think, is wow. I can't even begin to imagine. But grief in many ways shapes us, not just, we will lose our parents, we will lose our pets, we may lose friends, we may lose wider family members, and so I think it's something that unites us all. But the way that we handle grief is so different and so individual. I know when my dad died, for example, which is many years ago now, I fell into a black hole for about 2 years, I would say. And I have so many vivid memories of that time, of things that I experienced and things that I happened. And I was also in therapy at the time, which was kind of quite lucky, I guess. And so I was able to really work through a lot of what was going on. And I kind of came out of it the other side, a very different person, I feel. But a real awareness of it takes work, right? Being or feeling grief is tremendously difficult and traumatic, and it's really hard work.
Yeah.
But it kind of needs to be. And I think that's where resilience comes from. The doing the work, right? You have to do the work. You have to do the hard things. You have to get out of your comfort zone. You have to lean into the feelings, however difficult they are. You have to believe that this will pass. You have to work at it. And I'm just reminded of a word in Swedish, actually, because as you know, I'm from Sweden originally, and we talk about sorgearbete, which literally translated means grief work. And people will say, how is your grief work going? As in, you know, we understand that kind of universal state, and that you have to lean into it. And so going through that builds enormous resilience, I think. And of course, grief isn't always about death. Grief is, you know, loss and betrayal and, you know, redundancy and lots of, you know, we grieve in lots of ways. And I think somehow we've become used to glossing over that part of life a little bit. You certainly don't see a lot of it on social media, I would say.
No, and I think it's cultural as well. She said that, you know, the Swedish would ask, how is the grief work going, which it is a really lovely way to put it, actually, because it doesn't mean that it's over, or I'm not avoiding the topic, or I don't want you to talk about it because it's uncomfortable for me. You know, it's and also it comes back to the process, that it's a process. You can't skip around it, you can't go over it, there's no quick fix. It's a really uncomfortable process, and I think if there's anything we can share there is that resilience can be that uncomfortable process, actually.
Yes, absolutely, you know. And it's not a linear process.
No.
It's a big old
I thought I had
human,
it, and now
messy.
I don't. And one step forward, 3 back.
Yes. But it's those little steps that you know, get you moving forward. And realising, actually, as I'm sure when you were going through that grief process, that you have a support system, that you know, it's not just reliant on you. It's kind of, you know, when I think over the years of teachers and friends and mum and dad and people that really supported me, actually, to become resilient, because I couldn't have done it on my own. You know, there was a certain amount of work I needed to do on my own, but every now and again you just need somebody else to be there and to listen and to go, it's alright, it's going to be okay. You know? And I think in times of difficulty we do often turn to our loved ones, don't we? And again, going back to, you know, pandemic, what we've found, I think, is a real connection, that we have been able to connect. We're all having a universal experience. And we've been able to connect, perhaps not socially or even physically in the way that we used to, but we, you know, that connection is so important. More now than ever, and we lost that initially because we couldn't see people. Do you know what I mean? There's a connection that I feel you can't get over FaceTime, or do you know what I mean? Sitting, having a cup of tea with somebody and just having their presence, you know, can have more of an effect. And really, it's a real human need, isn't it? It's a real human I think we're wired for it. I think we're wired for connection. And so that has to be part of resilience as well. Feeling connected, staying connected, and just actually interestingly, going back to my experience of depression, what happens then is that you lose connection, and sometimes you don't notice. You just start to become a little bit more insular. And perception. You lose perspective, don't you? You lose perspective. This is it. I'm always going to feel like this. It's never going to get any better. And what you need, part of the human connection is other people have got a different perspective on things, and that's always so useful. And I remember my husband, when we first had children, he's quite a loner, you know, he does have his friends, but he wouldn't be dashing down the pub and having that kind of social life. And I always, you know, when anything happened with the children, he would worry a lot. Whereas I had my mum friends, and I would be able to say, oh, but this happens all the time. And that happened to young Ben just yesterday.
Yeah.
And this is what kids go through. And he would suddenly get it into perspective then that, oh, okay, this is fine.
So we've discussed so much, so I just want to kind of sum up.
Yes.
You know, for anybody watching at home.
Yes.
Resilience. What should we have in our resilience toolbox? What are the main things? We had to boil it down to the essentials and what we've talked about today. I think for me, mine would be the paradox. You're not always going to feel resilient. So if you're sitting watching this and listening and you're not feeling very resilient, know that it's something that you can cultivate and that you can bounce back from whatever you're going through.
And you've had it before.
Yeah.
And you will have it again.
Yes.
Even if you don't have it right at this very moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
For you?
I think this too shall pass. Nothing is forever.
Yeah.
Keep perspective. It's not a permanent state. It is something fluid and will change. And that's resilience, is recognising that, I think. Remembering it, which is hard to do sometimes. Yeah.
Embracing change.
Yes.
Which can feel hard in the current climate, but focusing on what you can do within that change as things are happening. What
Taking baby steps. Yeah.
Baby steps.
Yeah. Battle the overwhelm with small actions. Yeah. And connectivity, you know, reaching out to people, which can be very difficult, but...
And it might just be because you've had an idea, and, you know, ideas naturally don't happen on their own. You might need somebody else who's really good at the tech side of things, but you've got the creative... So it's that connectivity could be the reason that your project or your idea comes to life.
Yeah.
So actually sharing that idea with somebody, although it can be a scary thing, is part of that.
Yeah. I think amazing things happen when we connect to people. Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it won't be immediate.
No. Yeah, you plant a seed and it won't take for a couple of months or... Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, Adam, thank you so much for asking me along. I could talk for hours. So you've managed to rein it back, which is great.
Good.
But I would very much like to know, what makes you feel resilient?
What makes me feel resilient? Probably embracing vulnerability. I think as an actor anyway, that's one thing that is non-negotiable in the job, and I hope and I know when I get back to work that I'll do that again. I'll embrace vulnerability. Yeah.
Daring greatly.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you the same question.
Okay.
What makes you feel resilient?
I lean on the love of my family, and I think no matter how bad things get, I have my husband and my 2 children, and all the love that we have for each other is like my bubble of resilience. No matter what, we have that.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for having this chat.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.